Welcome into the newest episode of Side Mission. Like always, I'm your host, Rusty Ellis, joined by just one of the boys today, Kyle, and we are talking about episode 3 of The Last of Us from HBO. Kyle, 3 for 3. 3 episodes, 3 good ones. At least I think we agree. I don't know. You might have thought it was stupid and you just didn't tell me. But I think they're 3 for 3 with 3 really, really damn solid episodes. Overall takeaways, Kyle, what did you think of this one?
Yeah, I think that the episodes honestly continue to get better and better, the way that they're fleshing out these characters and the way that they're really showing that, they're not just interested in giving us a cut and dry, here is the video game, but with real actors. They're actually interested in telling a unique story that is somewhat separate from the game, but in a good way, in my opinion.
I agree. I like that it's not just like the show, and there are so many people out there that have said things along the lines of, I don't like how this has been changed, and I think I've said this on both the previous 2 episodes, and I will continue to say it every episode until people learn. But if you want something that is exactly like the game, go play the game. If you want to experience the story with no differences, go play the game. Go look up a Let's Play of The Last of Us on YouTube. Like, go look up and look up the story, look up the script, look up stuff like that instead of complaining, because it's an adaptation. Adaptations are loosely based off of the source material they're given. There's obviously liberties that are taken, and it's all dependent also on the directors, the showrunners, the writers, the producers. It's all dependent on them as well. And I think that has been... I don't think that those complaints have been louder than they have for this 3rd episode, because so many people I've seen on Twitter have said, I hate that we don't get any interaction between Ellie and Bill, and I understand that because the interactions in the game are funny. They're very, very interesting. I get that. But I also think that we get a much deeper version of Bill when, might as well go ahead and dive right into the story here. Obviously, spoilers abound. This episode focuses a lot more on the origin story of Bill and Frank. Now, obviously, in the game, Frank's dead by the time you ever really even see him in the game, so you don't know anything about him. He never talks, never says anything. But Kyle, obviously, the biggest departure from the game is that he's alive for this episode. He's alive for the entirety, and he's, I think, brilliantly acted. I think the actor's name was Murray Bartlett. Did a really, really good job playing it. I'm going to look that up just so I don't look like an idiot. But I feel like for backstory on 2 characters that we're probably not going to see again for a while in this show, I feel like this show did an excellent job building these characters up and kind of giving their full story in a very short amount of time.
Oh, absolutely. I think that the way that they, first of all, I have to say the way that Nick Offerman portrayed Bill was fantastic.
I agree.
I absolutely loved the scene where, the military comes in and they start tanking everybody, but he's hiding down in a bunker. And, once everybody's gone, he just starts going to town. He's having the time of his life, just, raiding all these warehouses like Home Depot and, building, essentially his own town. He's free of, all the societal pressures that were on him. And you really see him kind of excited and happy to be alive. But as time goes on, he starts to get lonely. And he kind of, becomes depressed in such a awful world, the way that things have gone. I think that part is where it was most like the game. Because in the game, obviously, Bill was that was his entire character. He had already lost Frank. He was very, hardened and depressed and sad. But in this, it was almost the opposite, because right as, we see him just learning how to survive, along comes Frank. And that's where things really start changing. And I gotta commend them both for playing these parts so well.
I agree. I think that there's some roles that I feel like you could hand to any actor and they would do a really good job with it. I feel like these 2 roles needed to be... I think Nick Offerman, again, was almost born to play Bill. Like, I really feel like he nailed that, because the funny thing is, obviously everyone knows Nick Offerman from Parks and Rec, where he plays Ron Swanson. The funny thing is, I see a lot of similar ideologies
Oh
between
yeah.
Ron Swanson and Bill, to where this feels like a role he was almost born to play. There's the joke at one point when he and Frank are arguing, and he's like, "Oh, I know, 9/11 was an inside job, and the government are all Nazis," and Bill turns around and goes, "The government are all Nazis," and it very much sounds like Ron Swanson. It very, very
It
much.
definitely was a Ron Swanson moment.
It's one of those where I don't think Nick Offerman had to really change up much of what he was doing from Ron Swanson to play this role. And again, Murray Bartlett as Frank, for a character that we've never heard speak, a character we've never heard any voice lines from, I feel like he
Yeah.
portrayed what the Frank in the game would have been similar to. I feel like he played that role really, really well in that, he's more or less, I don't want to say like the confident one, but he's like the outgoing of the two. He's the two that's more friendly and more receptive to help. It's obviously part of how they meet Joel and Tess and how they begin, smuggling things back and forth. Joel and Tess giving them things from the city, Bill and Frank giving them, medication and stuff like that, and extra ration cards, stuff like that from the outside. I think that this episode does a great job of also showing the growth of their relationship because they first meet each other. Bill and Frank, Bill doesn't like him and is close to shooting him. And he actually, what is it? Frank falls into one of the traps that Bill had set, and that's how they originally meet. Like, I just felt like that was very spot on for the character of Bill, that a trap is how he meets a man that he falls in love with. That just makes sense.
Right.
That just makes sense for some reason. That's a very weird sentence. I say it out loud, but it just makes sense. If you played the game, It's one of those if you know, you know.
Right.
But I liked the progression again of their relationship. You see Bill kind of opening up a little bit more, and then obviously the scene that everyone I think is talking about is the scene with the strawberries. Is the one where Frank surprises him with a garden that he's made, and he's grown all these different, he's grown these strawberries for him. And one of the best lines is in the episode, I think, was from Bill in this scene, and it was, before you, I never had any reason to be afraid. And that's him saying, like, I had nothing to lose. I never feared anything, and now the only thing I'm afraid of is to lose you. And I thought, Kyle, I think in terms of an emotional episode, I love that the people behind this show have chosen to go so in depth with these characters.
I absolutely agree. I think one of my favorite lines from the episode was also during the strawberry scene, but it was when, Bill was talking to Frank and he was asking him, he's like, "How'd you do this?" And he said, "Oh, I traded one of your guns for the seeds." And Bill goes, "What?" He starts freaking out on him. And he was like, "Don't worry, it was just a small one." I was like, that was totally,
Yep.
like the whole time, I feel like he really embodied this character. He was totally born to play these gun-toting prepper characters. I mean, it was so great to see, them interact. Their whole dynamic was, like you said, one of the biggest change-ups from the game. But I gotta say, it feels almost more, wholesome and pleasant the way that Bill's character, ends up, because they end up getting to grow old together, and you see them fight a couple of times, but in the end obviously they make up, and they one day wake up and Frank says that it's his last day. He's in a wheelchair.
Whew.
And he just can't get around as well as he used to, and he's obviously got some sort of illness, and he just decided that he doesn't want to go on anymore.
He doesn't feel
And
like
he
life
tells
is worth
Bill.
living like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and Bill takes him out to do all of these things that he wanted to do, just have the greatest last day that he could. And I think the part that definitely hit the hardest was that dinner scene.
Yes.
The whole time, because it's the end of the day. And so Bill brings out this really nice meal that he's prepared for him and Frank, and Frank says that he wants Bill to crush up these pills and put them in the wine that he poured for him. And at the end of their meal, you see him pour 2 glasses of wine. He crushes up the pills, and they both down the drink And Frank notices that Bill, downed it with him. He didn't just kind of sip on it like you normally would with wine. And
Yep.
so he looks at him and he says, there were pills already in the bottle, weren't there? And Bill says, enough to kill a horse.
That's a
And
very Bill line.
yep, it really was. I think that and then, they get up and they leave. That was such, an emotional moment. The whole conversation between them where Frank was like, I don't like this, but, I'm okay with it. And I think, that whole part was very, very emotional and touching. And for a character like Bill from the game to see him this way in the adaptation, I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I know this might be a hot take, but I think I like this better than Bill from the game.
It's very
Just,
close for me.
yeah, I feel a much more genuine connection, honestly, because he feels a lot more humanized. And, I don't think it takes away from the game in any way. The game, is a different, it's a different story. Obviously, the same premise, same characters, but, this isn't going to be told the way that the game told it. And that is very evident in the last part where Joel and Ellie do come in.
Yeah, and this is again a big departure from the game because obviously everybody that's played the game knows that in the actual game, I've said game like 5 times in the last 20 seconds, but you know if you've played the game before, you know that most of this section is you going through Bill's town, looking for an engine to put in a car. For Joel to get Ellie across the country, and obviously where they have to go is very far away. They can't just walk the entire way. This episode makes a very bold decision to never have Joel and Ellie and Bill interact. It makes a very bold decision to do that, and for me, it worked. For a lot of people, it worked, and that's why you see the high ratings for it. There will be some stupid people out there that say, "Oh, I want it to be exactly like the game. I want them to fight a bloater just like in the game." And for me, again, I go back to if you want that, play it. But, I mean, that just is what it is. Obviously, they find, Ellie finds Bill's note that he left for Joel, pretty much informing him that he and that he and Frank have, overdosed. And that, Joel is welcome to take whatever he needs, whatever supplies, ammunition, weapons. He is, food. He's free to take whatever he wants. And obviously, they end up with the truck. They take everything they need and they move on to where episode 4, the big departure that's going to make, and I don't think it's that big of a departure, but it doesn't really matter what I think. The big departure in episode 4, if you haven't heard, is that it's going to take place in Kansas City, not in Pittsburgh, like in the game.
Yes.
So I don't think it's going to make much of a difference because in Pittsburgh, they don't really go to any monumental landmark. So yeah. I don't think that's really going to make that big of a difference. But I have to say that this, again, the reason why I love this show so far is because these are not simple characters. And there's no real good characters. Good as in like they're good versus evil. There's no real good character. Everyone's kind of got damage, everybody's got trauma, and there's, that's part of who they are. I like that we're taking time to learn about each character. And that we're taking time to see their full story. And I think that no line in the episode better sums up the relationship between Bill and Frank than what Frank says when he informs Bill the morning of his last day. And he says, "I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that, every day has been the best day of my life with you. I've had a whole lot of bad days with you. But I've also had more good days with you, more so than anyone else." I butchered that line there, but you get what I'm saying. Like, again, it's him recognizing, like, it hasn't always been easy. I think it was 13 years or so that they were with each other, or 16 years. It was one of the two. It wasn't always easy, and it wasn't always good, but there was a lot more good than there was bad. Kyle, let's talk about another scene when the Raiders attack. Because you told me you thought that Frank might die there.
Yeah. I was wondering if, Bill, if Joel and Ellie were going to come in about halfway through, and Frank had died, and I thought it was going to be during that scene during the Raiders. And when Bill got shot, that threw me for a loop. I was like, no way. I mean, it was also a really badass scene because I think it really showed how capable Bill has been, not just against fighting off infected, but also fighting off the Raiders and the other people, in this world who might be out to take his supplies. And when Bill got shot, I definitely thought, I was like, man, they're about to kill him, and it was going to be Frank who was left out. But then neither of them died there, and that it was just full of twists for me. But yeah, I definitely thought that during that scene that was where Frank was going to end up dying, and turns out that wasn't what happened.
That again, that whole scene for me, that was funny because there's so much about Bill's character that I love, and
Right.
the traps and the bunker and just like the doomsday prepper in him. That is some of my favorite parts about Bill is that you see all of these experiences. You see how much fun he has at the start of essentially the apocalypse when he's going around, driving around with this big ass boat. Hitched to his truck. He's driving around with this big ass boat, looting all these stores and having fun while doing it. That was a ton of fun, and again, I can't give enough credit to Nick Offerman for how good he was in the show. Murray Bartlett as well. For an episode that primarily features two actors, they absolutely knocked it out of the park. I did like also, we also did get to see, for all the people out there that are bitching and complaining about no Bill and Ellie, we did get to see a little bit of what Joel and Bill interact, a little bit of what their interaction was like. We got to see a little bit of that in a flashback when when Joel and Tess first meet Bill and Frank. And for me, it all felt very real to what the game would have been. It felt very, very accurate to how Bill and Joel interacted within the game, is that they don't really trust each other, but they know they kind of need each other. And I thought that was great. I love that Anna Torv, who I thought did a really good job of playing Tess the first two episodes leading up to Tess. I like that she got a little bit more screen time and wasn't just killed off 2 episodes in and that's it, no more of her. But I think that the interactions that we did get were very true to the game. Now the question is, as we wrap this up, what are, through 3 episodes, Kyle, what do you think maybe your biggest criticism is for the show so far? Because I have one, and I think me and you might have the same one. But I'm interested to hear what your biggest criticism for the game, not for the game, for the show is.
For me, honestly, I know that they said that they're, not going to be gratuitous with the violence and that they're going to try and contain it to solely impactful scenes. However, I think that there are a few scenes, like the Raiders scene, like, the scene with the clickers in episode 2. I think that there are a couple of times where maybe you could have added a little bit more, because the game it's very violent, and I don't understand how they're going to handle season 2, because
season 2 is a part. Last of Us Part 2 is a very violent video game, one of the most violent in gaming history for a game not without Doom in the title.
For real.
It's a very violent game.
I definitely, I don't want them to be gratuitous with it, but I think that in a few scenes here and there, it's not bad, especially when you're coming off of such a, realistic premise. And I think that, I as much as I really do enjoy all of the character building, I would like a little bit more action. I'd like to see, some more Joel and Ellie fighting infected, or where they start fighting raiders or other people. I would have liked to see maybe a little bit more of Bill and Frank fighting off infected or raiders, or
I would have loved to have seen them looting. See like Bill teaching Frank like his ways, like going and looting where he does. I would have liked to have seen that. That would have been cool.
Yeah, honestly, that's got to be my. And it's not a huge criticism, but that's got to be probably my biggest criticism.
Yeah, I think that in terms of biggest criticisms, and this is going to sound like a cop-out because this is one that I think the internet has gotten right so far, through 3 episodes, we haven't really seen a lot of just Joel and Ellie. Haven't really seen a lot of just them. And, I mean, at this point, you know, and again, I hate to just compare it to the game, but that's what it's going to compare to. We saw a lot more of them, and I get that a lot of it was to build backstory for other characters, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I am excited to see more of those two moving forward because the beginning of this episode, it's the first episode that didn't really have like a big tie-in scene to how the outbreak started or, you know, scientifically explaining the outbreak of the infection. It just starts with Joel and Ellie, you know, kind of just picking up and moving on from Tess's death from episode 2. And there is one really interesting scene, and that's when Ellie finds the clicker. Or not really a clicker, I guess it's just a runner that's slowly becoming a clicker maybe, because it didn't really look like a clicker, because this clicker still had sight. Right. And that's the big thing with them, is that they're blind and they see with sound, basically. They use like essentially echolocation. You kind of see Ellie's anger come out.
Yes.
And you see her anger when she kills it. And I think that's interesting. And I don't think that scene was in there for nothing. I think that scene is in there. I think that scene is in there to plant a thought in your head of, you know, this girl's got some anger. She's got some hatred in her, and that's how Ellie is in the game, too. Ellie has a lot of anger within her, has anger issues, and she's like that in both games, to be honest. So I don't think that scene was nothing. I think that absolutely has some ramifications moving forward. That's just the beginning of it. The last thing I want to talk about is that in terms of things that were brought over from the game to the show, I loved Pedro Pascal's delivery of his last few lines to Ellie before they leave Bill's at the very end. And that's, you know, he gives her little speech of, if we're going to keep moving forward, here's how this is going to work. You don't bring up Tess ever. You don't tell anybody about your condition. And you do what I say when I say it. And I closed my eyes and I replayed it at the end of the episode once, you know, the credits rolled. I went back and listened to the scene, closed my eyes, and I said, that is Joel. Pedro Pascal, absolutely. In that moment, that is Joel. And I was already sold on him from casting. I liked what we'd seen the first 2 episodes, but in that scene I was like, I'm good to go. I'm ready for this. And I really think that Bella Ramsey is going to be doing the same thing for the character of Ellie these next couple of episodes. I think for the first 3 episodes of this series to be as good as they are, considering that most video game adaptations do not do well critically. They do well with the box office, right. They do well with the views, but they don't do well critically. The fact that they've done this well through 3 episodes, and we've got some really good stuff coming up, especially when Sam and Henry enter the fray, and I'm really excited for that. I think that's going to be some of the best episodes of the series. I'm interested to see, because I think that they leaked the next 2 like run times for the episodes. I think one is going to be like 1 hour and 12 minutes, and another one's going to be like 58 minutes. It's going to be a little over 2 hours. And there's part of me that wonders, do you think Sam and Henry will get 2 episodes? Because honestly, their storyline in the game is not short.
I think they'll probably end up getting 2 episodes.
I would like that. I would like to see those 2 characters given 2 episodes. I think that'd
be cool.
I think that they're great characters, and again, if they're, we talked about it earlier, Kyle. I said that it wouldn't shock me, and people are going to hate this if you didn't like backstory. It wouldn't shock me if part of one of the next few episodes was backstory for those 2 of, okay, here's how they ended up in, I guess, Kansas City now, and here's who they were with before, here's what led them to leave and separate. I feel like there's a good chance all of that happens, and I feel like there's also a good chance we see a look at what their lives were like before the outbreak.
Right.
Which we don't know anything about. That's never been talked about by anyone with Last of Us, is what was Sam and Henry's, what was their life like before the outbreak. I would be interested to see, I guess, more of that, to see kind of like where they were as brothers before all of this happened. So, Last of Us Episode 3, great episode. 3 really good episodes so far for this show. And I know we are counting down the days until we get episode 4 this Sunday. So that's going to wrap up this episode of Side Mission. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Side Mission Pod. You can follow us on Facebook as well at Side Mission Podcast. For the 2 non-existent asshats, and Thacker and Matt, and for Kyle, I'm Rusty. Thanks for listening.